Are you falling behind on House of Dragons? Do you come up with your friends and they're like, let's get ready for episode 4, and you're like, I haven't watched episode 1 yet. Well, you're in luck, because this is gonna be the recap for everything that has happened so far in House of Dragons from episode 1 to episode 3. So sit tight, buckle up, and let's get to the recap. So to start from the beginning, honestly, episode 1 kind of felt like they tried to put a lot of information together and to push the story like in a kind of a catapult way. And throughout the series, you'll kind of see how that it does that. It gets faster and faster and faster until they decide they want to slow down later. So this whole series starts a long time before the original events of Game of Thrones. So in the first episode, they honestly just spend the whole time kind of trying to talk about the successor. King's getting old, he's finding his successor. The obvious choice, which is the brother, younger, powerful but mischievous and can be potentially dangerous, does not want to be chosen by the council to be the successor. So where does that leave us? The girl, the daughter of Raniera. So there was a lot of backlash trying to get her to be committed to the Iron Throne. Even so much that the king risked his wife's life to make sure that his future son was born, that ended up dying anyways. So sacrificed wife and sacrificed son. So, in a sense, there's not a lot that goes on plot-wise so far in the first episode. Sure, there's the joust. They and introduce a couple knights. Sir Kristen Cole is a notable one, for example. We'll talk about him more in a bit. And honestly, it's just a lot of spectacle. They have some graphic scenes. They have some whorehouse scene where Daemon is having sex with whores, or as his secret lover, as we'll find out soon. And the joust scene is unnecessarily bloody, and it's like, this is apparently a Game of Thrones staple to have things be a little bit more shock value. So I do think that if you really want to get a good premise, like if you're trying to jump into episode 4, and you want to see things like, if you want to see the signature Dracarius signal, Dracarius, when the dragon burns the funeral, these are probably things that you'd probably want to watch at first episode 4. So not much happens besides what I said. Obviously, Raniera is named at the end of the episode the successor to the Iron Throne. So then we go into episode 2. So episode 2 is where they really start to introduce the first villain that I don't really feel like puts a big foothold as a villain. It's kind of a placeholder. The crab feeder is like in the stepstones, and he's terrorizing them, and he's kind of just like, he traps his enemies and has crabs eat them. Pretty on the nose, if I say so myself. But then of course Daemon, not being able to become the successor, kind of goes into a little fit and runs off. Well, he was ordered by his king to go back to his wife, which he obviously did not do, but he still did leave. So it seems that the council is kind of conflicted on whether they should send troops to Stepstones, because they're not at war. And if they send troops to the Stepstones, that's implication that you're at war, one way or another. Because the crown sending troops is just a war. It is a war, and it would start a war. In Daemon's rebellion, he sees Dragonstone already, and he kind of steals actually the egg of Rhaenyra's younger brother that was supposed to be for her younger brother that died, because he wants to have his own dynasty in Dragonstone because the king kind of rebuked him. And it's a very interesting relationship because the king seems to be Daemon's only defender, but somehow they still end up fighting. Like, there's a lot of people in the council that Daemon could be fighting with, and I just feel like the king, and sure, he does some harsh choices because he's been put in a corner. He's not one of the ones to be fighting with. It's like his biggest ally, and he's kind of just shooting in the foot. But I digress. This series jumped a lot of time in between the first and second episode, maybe like 6 months, because there were just some things that just happened that is like, oh, this is already set up. I think they want to take this series much faster than anticipated, and from the second to third episode there's an even bigger time gap, so we'll get there when we get there. So in reality, again, this episode kind of doesn't move so much of the plot. In reality, the big thing that happens is slowly Otto Hightower is trying to put his daughter on the king. Did a little bit in episode 1 and episode 2 because the queen died, And then eventually he knows that the king is supposed to remarry. However, to strengthen the bonds between some families and to make the crown seem stronger, one of the council members recommends that they marry her daughter. For someone who has not watched the Game of Thrones, and this won't discredit me because this gives me an unbiased perspective, so I won't have this image in my mind of what it should be. I'll give you an objective analysis of a recap. But I digress. When they put out this 10-year-old looking ass, I was like, what? She's supposed to be 12, okay, whatever. But still, I'm like, really? And then I was just like, oh no. And I'm like, okay, yeah, this is Game of Thrones. They've talked about this before. So yeah, the king even acknowledges that she's 12. And it's like, I don't want to marry her. I don't even know. The excuse that he gave is, I don't know her that well. And I think that's hilarious because out of all the excuses it could have been, the reason that you don't want to marry a 12-year-old is because you don't know her well enough. Okay. Continuing on, eventually, by the end of the episode, he picks a new wife. And it's you guessed it. Raniera has a best friend who's older, probably like around the age of 15 maybe, probably 16, 15, from Otto Hightower's daughter, the one that he's been kind of shoveling towards him. He ends up picking her as the new queen. Obviously that makes Raniera extremely mad. And then there's another thing with Allison and Raniera. I feel like they're trying to put some queer baiting into it because it's like a thing where it's like they give some tension, or it's like maybe more than friends, but I know I in my personal, and I'll eat my words later if it changes. In my personal opinion, I feel like it would not develop into anything, but it's just kind of just put there to like for the fans, like queer baiting, which who knows. For now, I can just see them kind of as close friends. There's nothing that has been definitive that there's any interest between the two of them besides being of close friends. So that's the end of episode 2. And then we gotta go to episode 3, where it's another huge time skip. It's like years this time. And it's like, why are they they're really moving the story along. I guess they don't have anything to put in between, because the episodes just haven't been moving the plot so much. So I guess in order to make the plot go faster, they've just been pushing the time frame. So this shows more fighting of the crab feeder, and Daemon is actually fighting with his dragon, and the crab feeder pen. But they hide in the caves to avoid the dragon fire and shower arrows on top of them, and they have to retreat. They've been at war for years, apparently. The years time skip is blowing. It's like putting me off, because I'm like, episode 2 we were at this time frame and already this massive amount of time has passed, and I'm just like, okay, all right, I guess we're going here. So eventually the king is trying to decide if he's gonna send troops to the Stepstones after all this time. Oh my gosh, after all this time, how would the crowd look if we send troops? If you want to win, just win. Like, I don't care how, like, I understand they're trying to present an intimidation factor, present power, so everyone stays in order and together. But would it be worse if your brother loses the war, or if you just send some troops late to finish it off? Which I think is stupid. When that happens, when Daemon gets the letter, he gets pissed. He gets so mad. And he ends up just like doing like this kamikaze mission that doesn't end up being a kamikaze mission, because he does not die and ends up just like destroying them all. And it's like, really, you couldn't do that 3 years ago? Or 2 years ago, whatever the time frame is. Just because your brother said he was sending ships, now you decide to make a good plan, or a risky plan that ended up succeeding. So the crab feeder is kind of vanquished, and they're trying, and then the king is trying to make Rhaenyra take a husband, because she is of age and it's time for her to take a husband. Remember, there's been a time skip of years. So eventually they kind of whittle it down that Rhaenyra gets to choose who she wants, but she just has to take someone, which is definitely a big step down, because before he was trying to force people on her, and then if she didn't like them, he would find someone else. So in the situation, he's trying to be as flexible as possible. And of course she's still rebelling, but it's like a thing where it's like, if it's her duty, like she either has to change president or just fulfill the duty. So that's kind of all of the first 3 episodes, honestly. It doesn't move the plot so much. And if you can go and watch all 3, that's 3 hours of time. If you don't really believe me when I'm saying this, yes, you might get a couple more scenes here and there, a couple of dialogues that are like important. A joke where it's like, they tried to say that they tried to marry, what's the thing? Because the king is with Allison Hightower now, and they had a child, a male, and he's 2. Someone suggested the 2-year-old marry Raniera. Are you to sate her? Because she doesn't want a husband, so just marry the brother and sister, which I know I heard that Game of Thrones is also kind of for incestuous topics as well, but I'm glad even the king laughed at that proposition because I'm dying on the inside. But at least he's like, no, that's ridiculous. Why would we do that? In a more stern way, where it's like, this is not even a choice that we're gonna even consider. Thank you. I'm glad you defend the sanity of myself. But either way. So now, it's gonna be episode 4 next week. So, I want to see what you think. We'll probably come back with some more recaps, and we'll get back to episode 4, and then we'll get to see how the story goes. If it starts picking up speed, and by picking up speed, I don't mean more time lapse. I don't want a 5-year gap or 10-year gap. Like, pick up speed and actually showing plot in the story. Like, I don't mind the dragon scenes. I don't mind jousting scenes. I don't mind the weird C-section scene that was very graphic. But yeah, it's more than just shock factor. I want plot development, and it's not really coming along because right now it's feeling like a light 7, the show. So we gotta see, and if it doesn't pick up, it's gonna start going down to 6. So either way, if you like this recap, and if you want to see some more movie reviews and recaps, be sure to subscribe and leave a comment. Tell me how you feel about coming into this next episode, episode 4, and tell me how you feel. And I'll see you in the next one.